Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to start with session number 2. I'm honored to ask to this on the stage the participants of the next session. Keynote will be given by Žilvinas Martinaitis, who is a partner of research manager at Visionary Analytics from Lithuania. Agrita Kiopa, Deputy Secretary General, State Secretary Director of the Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Ministry of Education and Science, Latvia. Katarzyna Kaczkowska, Deputy Director in the Department for Innovation and Development Support Programs, Ministry for Economic Development, Poland. Johanna Leino, Development Director, the Baltic Institute of Finland. And Bettina Eichler-Löbermann, Vice Director for Internationalization, Gender and Diversity Management, University of Rostock. So the panel goes like the previous ones. We have one keynote speech, and then we have the interventions by the panelists, and then we have a possibility to discuss the topic, what are the barriers for the widening excellence. In the first panel, we realized that there is still a gap, whether this is widening or narrowing. It's a matter of question. But now we are trying to find out what are the barriers from the perspective of the players or the stakeholders. And please, the floor is yours, Žilvinas.
Hello, thank you very much for providing this opportunity to share the results of our research that focused on the barriers for participation in framework programs as faced by the researchers in 4 countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. So we interviewed them, we surveyed the participants, we also surveyed the top-notch researchers who were not participating in the framework programs to better understand the reasons why. And the overall picture that emerged, I think, is that some of the challenges and barriers that researchers from these 4 countries face are broader in a sense, that many of the issues that I'll address are referred to an example of broader issues that also apply to other new EU member states. So therefore, whenever relevant, I'll talk about EU 13 more generally. So there is a relatively long history of cooperation of researchers in framework programs that started in 1992, and different framework programs have also introduced specific actions to support participation of researchers and get the necessary capacity to participate in framework programs. Nevertheless, the levels of participation remain relatively low. So all new EU member states, the EU 13, collectively received 5% from FP7, and the figures for Horizon also remain relatively the same. To give you a benchmark of what the 5% means, so the top most successful 5 organizations also secured 5% from FP7 and Horizon 2020. So it's 13 member states against 5 most successful organizations. And there's also this more general pattern of huge concentration effects, whereby top 500 organizations constitute less than 2% of all participants. Nevertheless, they receive 60% of the funding. What I think is even more disturbing is that generally, with the exception of Estonia, EU 13 countries are not catching up. The share of framework program budget secured remains relatively the same. Estonia is a notable exception. We calculated average annual contribution. So for Horizon 2020, during the first 2 years, Estonia managed to double the average annual contributions from framework programs. But there is always this on the other hand. So on the other hand, we tried to look at the relative size of a research and innovation system, and we took the proxy of average annual spending on research and innovation, and that's the axis horizontally, and vertically you see average Horizon 2020 contributions. So there is a very strong correlation between funding secured from framework programs and national funding. It's relatively strong. And what is also important in this graph is that the countries that are below this line are relatively, in relative terms, underperforming given the size of their research and innovation systems. And most of the EU 13 countries, which are in blue, are there, with the exception of Cyprus, Slovenia, and Estonia. We also looked at the networks. So there is the core group of countries that constitute the central nodes of most of the projects. And these countries are, no surprise, Germany, UK, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Italy, and Spain. The 3 Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, are on the periphery of this broader network. And also, if you look within the networks, the researchers from these 3 countries are usually partners within their own respective networks, carrying out relatively peripheral jobs and tasks. When looking at the Nordic countries, so they're quite close to the center, and they cooperate very intensively among themselves. So there is clearly a strong Nordic cooperation, and a strong cooperation with the central nodes, the Germany, UK, Netherlands, etc. However, the cooperation in absolute terms between the Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and the Nordic countries remains relatively underdeveloped. So for us, this suggested that if we're talking about Baltic science region, it's still there in the building, but we have not achieved that yet. So now I'm going to turn to the main barriers that inhibit more intensive participation. And the first hypothesis is that, well, whether or not participation in framework programs is a strategic priority for researchers. And as a proxy for willingness to participate, we took the number of eligible proposals per million inhabitants, and then that's on the vertical side. And then horizontally, you see, again, research and development expenditure per capita. So here the correlation is not so strong as with the funding received. However, we see again that a number of EU 13 countries are below the line, which means that given their size of research and innovation systems, they submit relatively few proposals. Estonia, again, also Malta, Cyprus, and Slovenia are again overperforming in terms of the number of eligible proposals submitted. So then we wanted to understand, so how come researchers from the Baltic region countries submit relatively less proposals? And if you ask them directly, which we did, so is it a strategic priority? Most of them says, of course, this is very important. However, it seems to me that this is more or less a strategic priority in terms of rhetorical commitment to participation. But if you look at the actual institutional investments in capacity building to participate there, they're simply not there. And the main reason I'm saying this is that when we asked, so what is the main barrier to participation? And the answer, the most popular answer was, well, lack of resources for developing proposal and developing a network that is necessary, as well as lack of capacities and skills of doing so. So in a sense, of course, there is most probably some path dependency there that the countries joined later the EU, but it's also, I think, a matter of lack of strategic interest. And then we asked, so why? What are the deeper reasons? And the deeper reasons, it seems to be extremely high competition, so very low success rates, which leave the sense of low likelihood of winning and the low likelihood that the investments into developing these capacities will pay off in the future. There is also this perceived lack of transparency, not by all the respondents, but by some who argued that some of the calls are clearly directed towards well-established large networks, and if you're not part of the networks, you don't have a chance, and therefore we just skip these calls. The second important group of barriers refer to excellence. And we wanted to understand, so is it excellence in research or is it excellence in proposal writing? So as a proxy, again, quite a rough one, for excellence in research, on the left-hand side, you see percentage of publications that are among the top 10% most cited in the EU as a percentage of all such publications in the EU. And we see that the new member states have less than 10%, which means that they are underperforming. So yes, research and innovation excellence is a big factor. However, if we compare this figure with the proportion of funding received, if excellence was the only factor, then the funding received should be by approximately 1% of the budget of framework program larger. So in some cases, that implies almost twice as much of the funding that was received there. And then we looked at the excellence of proposals. And this is a very nice and extremely difficult to read graph. So just to walk you through that, vertically you see the distribution of proposals, and along the normalized quality scores. So some proposals are good, some are bad. Horizontal bumps indicate where most of the proposals stand. And the horizontal red lines indicate thresholds. So what we see basically is that significant share of proposals submitted by researchers from these 4 countries are relatively good. They pass the thresholds. Nevertheless, they're not good enough to receive the funding. So it seems that there's only that much that is missing, but the target is still out of sight. It also suggests that researchers are better at various coordination and support actions, whereas if we look at the European Research Council, that's quite a different story and a sad one. We also tested, so I'm not sure if you can see it, Estonia generally looks like submitting better quality proposals, and yes, it's statistically significant difference from other countries. And one of the hypotheses, we did not look at why is that, but one of my hypotheses is that most probably it's due to the fact that they have a long history of competitive research funding, which, for example, in Lithuania was established only in approximately 10 years ago. Networks. Networks is a problem. We talked to researchers who are successful participants in the networks. Usually they are partners. And the history, common one, although with some exceptions, is that this is a long-standing network. They participate since FP6, some earlier than that. They take the role of partner, which means that they do not need to invest a lot in the development of the proposal. And since the network is well established, they have pretty good chances of winning. So this is a low-cost, low-risk strategy for them, and they are relatively happy, most of them, with this position. Of course, the drawback is that they are partners, not coordinators. However, the system also has significant drawbacks for the outsiders who are outside the networks, the ones who tried to lead, to set up their own networks. They reported immense difficulties in finding prestigious research organizations as well as industry players. Were not willing to join efforts with the relatively unknown research centers in this part of Europe, as well as the players who wanted to join the existing networks as partners found it extremely difficult to join. So this is another challenge. Well, lastly, we looked at the rules for calculation of budget. So the way the budgets are calculated, or personnel costs are calculated, they are based on on actual level of salaries. So since the level of salaries in Eastern European countries for researchers are lower, then the amounts paid are also lower, which implies significant differences. So we try to model what would change under different scenarios. So if the success rates of researchers from Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland were the same as the EU average, the amounts would increase slightly. However, if the rules for calculation of personnel costs were the same, so meaning researchers for the same kind of work receive the same salaries, the funding for Lithuania, for example, would more than double. For Estonia, the effect would be smaller, but nevertheless. And also during the interviews, quite a few researchers, as a matter of open questions, argued that they feel a little bit discriminated when they feel that they are paid less for the same work they are doing in comparison to counterparts in Western Europe. So the main challenges, just to sum up, are willingness and strategic incentives to invest in participation, quality of proposals, difficulties in joining the networks, and lastly, the rules for calculation of budget. And these are difficult issues to tackle, and we were asked specifically to look more on how the rules of FP or framework programs could be changed to address this issue. So I think one of the key and mostly a political question is, so who will be the drivers of innovation in the future in Europe? Currently, we see relatively few geographically concentrated, large centers of excellence. If we trust these top 500 organizations that secure roughly 60% of the framework programs to be the key drivers of innovation in Europe, that's fine, and that's a strategy to go. Then no major changes are really necessary. Otherwise, if we think that this is a relatively risky strategy or a strategy with the problems, then our recommendation is to focus on developing a critical mass of interlinked metropolises of excellence, rather than seeing just dispersed some islands of excellence around the Baltic Sea region. Another challenge, low success rates, lack of incentives to strategically invest. So I think the clear-cut recommendation is to increase the overall levels of funding for framework programs. And as I'm not a politician, I can say that it should be financially be at least as important as agriculture. Then there is this Matthew effect, that the participants who were more successful in the past have better chances in the future. So to tackle this, I think it's important to develop multi-stage evaluation process, whereby first it's only the idea that's evaluated, and then during the subsequent stages, the number of competing consortium declines, but funding increases, as well as introduce a double-blind evaluation of proposals. Challenge learning by doing is important to develop capacities. So there is an overwhelming support for further support for widening initiatives. Researchers that we talked to said that the networking, coordination actions are all nice and good. However, we are researchers. We would really welcome the opportunity to get funding for research, at least proportionally more than just networking. In the past, there have been some requirements of geographical coverage of networks, so that seems like a very straightforward way to include researchers from EU13. And that worked. However, our analysis of the historical pathways of the different networks suggests that once this requirement was dropped, the partners who were included, not due to their research excellence, but because of that requirement, were also dropped. So this cooperation was not sustainable. So therefore, we would argue that there is no need for geographical coverage requirements. Calculation of personnel costs, which are based on current salaries, reinforce the divides. And our recommendation would be to use the examples of Marie Curie allocation, so use fixed rates that are corrected for purchasing power parities to ensure the differences in prices and living levels. Baltic Sea region, we would argue that the differences that we see around the Baltic Sea region are actually not unique to the Baltic Sea region, but it's an example of larger challenges faced by the EU. And so far, there's a challenge of how do we address this. So we would argue that the Baltic Sea region could act as a policy innovation test bed to test the different approaches, maybe develop a macro-regional governance structure, following the example or extending the existing organizations in the Nordic countries, the Nordforce, that could facilitate structured cooperation rather than project-by-project cooperation, which is the case at the moment. And lastly, although this was not our main focus, we would recommend the countries that are relatively underperforming to do the homework and develop open and excellent research systems. Thank you very much. Apologies.
We've used part of the time for the discussion, but it was so rich overview of the barriers that it was impossible to somehow to stop you. So, from the national perspective, Agrita, from our closest neighbor from Latvia.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm really happy to be here and to be able to speak about all those issues that we find extremely important. And also, I'm happy that Žilvinas was the one who gave the keynote speech. And from my perspective, from what I know, is the findings of Žilvinas. And I'm very proud that it was our part of the project in which Žilvinas happened to work and do this excellent job. Those findings, though, are reflecting, I would say, sociology of science 101, which is nothing wrong with Žilvinas and his work, but it is something wrong with the way we have been organizing the research systems. Because if it is so obvious that all the inequalities are in the system, then I think we as policymakers have failed to work to do the work properly. And I'm taking quite a bit of that on myself, given that we at home in Latvia, we also work on the same things, and that system and those system failures that Žilvinas just outlined, they worked at all levels. Whether that is national level, whether that is departmental level, whether that is regional or European or global, those are the universal things. And I think if we really want to move somewhere, that our job has to be kind of themed and framed by the idea of inclusive excellence. And the two of the things that Žilvinas suggested, the double-blind evaluation and fixed rates in salaries, is something that actually can deliver the results, because those are the core, the backbone at the research funding when we want to achieve good results and when we want to give equal opportunities. Of course, there are many other issues at play which we as policymakers have to take in place, and those are regional development, those are certain areas, and so on. So with this introduction, I'll move to our national perspective. Of course, we picked up the issues that Žilvinas' study has brought out, and we expected those results. We were not surprised, but we got a good confirmation. Yes, it is what it is, and we got the facts behind our feeling about it. So therefore, for ourselves, if we look at those types of problems and barriers, we, for our policy purposes, then group them in the groups of barriers related to critical mass, to the funding rules, and to the networks. Having that in mind, we have devised in Latvia a number of our instruments and our policies. And our instruments and policies are, I would say, probably nothing new, but with new elements in the policy programs. And I'll try to outline a little bit. When we think about the networking and networking within the country and outside of the country, we try to keep in mind that basic premise of the whole network idea is that it serves for purpose. It usually emerges and is created around funding, and it evolves or stays if there is a good cause and or there is a funding stream that is associated with it. And for those who are in, the natural tendency is to keep the resources, keep the central positions. For those who are not in or are on the peripheries, for those getting in requires often also some kind of ticket to get in. And when we look through what those tickets are, what brings us in, what are the good practices, what are the good examples, we see it's often is based either on unique expertise, unique data that is available for researchers. It is based on unique or complementary capacities. And it is also based on, very often, on very unique natural resources, which are not anywhere else, but everybody wants to study. So those are probably the tickets. And therefore, designing our policies back home, we work a lot on increasing the critical mass in our excellence areas. We very deliberately work on networked concept of expanding our critical mass of excellence. And we have defined our task for our universities and research institutes to work on globally connected, locally embedded human capital. We say that it's their work, that they have to produce people who from the day one are embedded and have work in their respective institutions, and from the day one they start working with those institutions, are globally connected and participate. And we also put a lot of emphasis on societal challenges. In this we probably mimic all other national policies in a sense that mimic also European policies, but we have opened quite a bit of a discussion in making it relevant for our people. And at the bottom is probably what is really new in our policies. We put quite a bit of effort in, we are starting a communication campaign to gain the support from our people and our politicians to both increase our excellence in critical mass and excellence, and to also go out and be more internationally active. So I would like to conclude with some questions that we don't find answers yet. And that was something we were hoping that Žilvinas will bring in his research, and he did. And one of the questions is, what are the aspects of design of the funding programs that keep the system in its ways of performance and doesn't allow it to change? And I think the answer about the double-blind networks and salary differences is the key for that. And how to practice the inclusive excellence. I think we have to want it to practice, and then we can do the first thing, and then I think we can achieve the results. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And then we have the Polish perspective. Katarzyna, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me, and I know time is of the essence, so I'm just going to make a very brief introduction. Myself, I work with the European structural funds and aimed mostly at entrepreneurs and enterprises. So my perspective will be a little less research focused, a little more towards the enterprises. However, as Žilvinas described his research on the researchers and their participation or non-participation in FPs 7, I have to say that this was pretty much in accord with the findings of our national contact point for European programs as far as the reasons for non-participation or poor participation of Polish enterprises in framework programs, because the perceived barriers are also the perceived lack of chance or little chance to succeed. There's also lack of resources to draft high-quality proposals, and there's also the perception of kind of closed clubs and networks that are difficult to enter in order to participate in projects. So in our European structural funds financing, we designed some instruments that are supposed to at least start tackling with these barriers. And for that, we, in our operation program Smart Growth, we use the Seal of Excellence. We've started one pilot call for proposals in the Seal of Excellence initiative, which is basically substitute financing for those proposals that were very high quality and obtained the Seal of Excellence certificate, but didn't get funded in Horizon 2020. So we had around 30 proposals for stage 1, which is financing the feasibility studies and preparation to R&D project. And we actually found that there was quite a wide interest among the entrepreneurs in using this kind of alternative funding. So we had 18 successful proposals, and we were financing them right now. And it seems that it's a good tool in order to encourage enterprises to actually start writing their proposals to Horizon 2020, because if they don't succeed but still have excellent proposals, they get higher chances of getting the financing from the national structural funds. And also, we're trying to align the national financing with the Horizon 2020 financing, so it's relatively easy for the enterprises to participate in the national financing. We also have a tool to finance phase 2 of the SME Initiative's Seal of Excellence project. These are a little more difficult because these are R&D projects, so they're basically larger, and here time is of the essence. So if someone got the Seal of Excellence, participated in a Horizon 2020 competition and got the Seal of Excellence certificate, for example, 2 years ago, there's a high probability that they've already financed the project from other sources. So we have slightly less proposals here, but still we see a wider interest of enterprises in participating in Horizon 2020 calls, because they can see that there's alternative funding available and relatively easy once you have the Seal of Excellence certificate. So it seems like this, even though these are very early birds and we cannot really say this is like a very widely used instrument, but it seems like it might be quite a good way in order to get encourage enterprises to actually participate in Horizon 2020 calls for proposals. The last instrument I'd like to talk to you about is aimed at researchers. It's called the International Research Agendas, and this is also funding that is synergetic with Horizon 2020, but in a slightly different way. This is match funding. So if there's a team that wants to participate in teaming in Horizon 2020, we offer them match funding for this kind of proposals and projects. In order to participate, you have to have an international partner, a renowned excellence center that cooperates with you on that project, and you have to establish pretty much a new unit that runs the project. So this is not a very easy project. I actually spoke to a colleague from the University of Gdańsk who already has gotten this kind of financing, and she said it took over a year to actually prepare the proposal. So it's not easy. You have to build a network, you have to build trust among the partners, but it's possible, and because we're funding it from also the national structural funds, we're kind of paving the way, making it a little easier for the proponents to participate in teaming as well. So there's quite a wide interest also among international partners in this kind of financing, and it seems to be quite slow for the moment, but we're seeing increased interest in that, and I think we're going to get more and more higher quality proposals. Thank you very much, and I'm open to questions, of course.
So, and the next speaker will be from Finland, Johanna Leino.
Yes, hello. I'm Johanna Leino from the Baltic Institute of Finland, from city of Tampere. And thank you for inviting me also here into this conference. I have not been involved in the Baltic Science Network discussions before much, but it has been very interesting to see the discussions here and mirror it to our concrete experiences from Baltic Sea region cooperation projects. So I provide here a quite practical perspective on these issues, because Baltic Institute is a foundation owned by the city of Tampere, and we our purpose is to facilitate concrete cooperation projects, mainly in the Baltic Sea region, but also wider in Europe. And we don't only get projects for ourselves. We act as a lead partner in some projects, but also act like a consultant to other organizations and help other organizations to get involved in EU projects. And we focus mainly on Interreg projects, or we have most experience from different Interreg projects, not so much about, we have not been involved really in research projects, but so I provide here my experience from these Interreg projects that we have. And I wanted to tell you about the Baltic Institute concept, a foundation owned by the city of Tampere, that it's a very good concept and a support service writing EU applications, so that not all the organizations have to learn this application writing, but it's good to centralize it to few organizations and so that those organizations can serve then the others, because it's quite hard. This EU application writing is quite hard, and it demands also long experience, and you have to have references and so on. So this is one solution to tackle these barriers in getting EU funding. For us, the reasons to be involved in the Baltic Sea region cooperation are these things that are said here also many times. So to enhance business and new innovations in the Baltic Sea region, and enable learning from other countries, and make enable the global competitiveness of the Baltic Sea region, and by enabling the using of the whole resource base of the Baltic Sea region. But this is actually quite hard, I think. The barriers that we heard here are quite significant. So there are big differences between Nordic and Baltic states. That's also very visible in our projects. Like, for example, if we I think the main barrier is that we have so different economic structures in these countries, and also different approaches to innovation policy. So if we think about, for example, smart specialization strategies and smart specialization policies in, for example, in Nordic states and Baltic states, so we have totally different approaches to that, and I think that creates problems in communicating with each other and learning from each other. So, for example, in the smart specialization strategies in Baltic states, it's nationally governed, but in Nordic states, it's mainly regionally governed. So in Nordic states, we have been more able to involve different practical level actors and create ecosystems of these within these smart specialization priority fields. But then in Baltic states, I see that it's quite hierarchical structure, and national level is not national level that is coordinating the smart specialization strategy. It's not having influence enough to the implementation level and practical level. So this is, for example, a big barrier which creates also communication problems, challenges between these countries. And as an example of one of our projects where we are lead partner, this is, I want to base some of the solutions for these barriers based on the experience from this BSR STARS S3 project, which is also financed by the Interreg Baltic Sea Region program. This is financed from the priority smart specialization, and we focus in this project in strong fields. These are bio and circular economy and digital economy that actually these fields have a lot of potential to have competitive advantage in the whole Baltic Sea region. These are very potential fields where the whole Baltic Sea region should cooperate. But for example, already in these sectors we see that there is in bio and circular economy field, for example, there are already strong Nordic networks, and we also discuss how to get Baltic states more involved in this cooperation in the circular economy, where we can globally be competitive. So, but as a conclusion from this idea of co-specializing, I would say that in the Baltic Sea region it would be good to select few strong fields where we could have competitive advantage, and put those priorities also as priorities in the financing program. For example, in the BSR Interreg program, the categories are innovation, environment, and accessibility, but those are very wide fields. Instead of having innovation as a wide field, we could select a few focus fields and concentrate on financing those cooperation in those fields where we could be more competitive. And that's also when looking at different smart specialization strategies in the region, we could discuss what would be the main fields in smart specialization, in main common fields in these smart specialization strategies. And this could be reflected also in the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, these strong fields. And another thing what we in the BSR STARS S3 project is that Nordic Council of Ministers is one partner in this project, and they they are now piloting transnational innovation voucher within this project, and that will be focusing on only on bio and circular economy research infrastructure, so that through this voucher, company from one country can utilize research facility in another country. And I think this kind of activity would be very important to have more in the Baltic Sea region, and to enable the transnational access to research and test facilities. And then, as a third and last thing, I would like to say that in this international cooperation and in the Baltic Sea cooperation, it's very difficult to get common understanding between countries. But good method for learning more would be that we could focus on to have more challenge-based approach, so that we could discuss common challenges transnationally, instead of discussing generally different things, but having this more challenge-based discussion where we could find different perspectives to common challenges.
So, thank you very much. And between this part and the discussion, we have one more presentation from the university perspective. Please, Bettina Eiler-Löbermann.
Yes, hello, good morning. Before I start, I would also like to thank the organizers for inviting me, and also for all the effort regarding the preparation of the session. I would like to briefly introduce the University of Rostock. The University of Rostock is located in the northeastern part of Germany, directly at the Baltic Sea. The economic situation in that region, in this federal state, it's not that comfortable than in other regions in Germany. However, we have a beautiful nature and we are quite famous for tourism. However, the University of Rostock is quite old. Actually, it is the oldest in the Baltic Sea region. It was founded 1419, and so we can celebrate soon our 600th anniversary. The founding foundation were only faculties, we had only 3 faculties when the university was founded, but now we have 9 faculties and about 14,000 students. So that university is rather small or medium-sized. We have a special structure at our university that is a so-called interdisciplinary faculty. This is rather a platform where scientists from the other faculties can do research together, can work together, and can interchange academic results. Here we have developed 4 main research themes. As you can see, one theme is science, technology, life, light, matter. The second is maritime systems. Then we have aging science and humanities. And the last one is knowledge, culture, transformation. And the research themes, maritime system, is this theme which belongs very much to the Baltic Sea. When we talk about international collaboration, usually we think about research and development. But of course, for universities, it is very important also the internationalization of the education and teaching. And here we were quite successful in the last years. We could increase the number of international students from 6 to more than 10% now. And this was mainly because we introduced English-speaking master courses. You know probably that the majority, mainly in the bachelor level, the majority of the courses in Germany is given in German. And this is indeed an obstacle for for international collaboration. And so mainly in the master levels, we introduced more English-speaking modules and courses. And regarding the research, we focus on interdisciplinary research, as I mentioned before, and we also want to develop strategic partnerships with other universities in the Baltic Sea area. The universities, these partner universities, should be similar and more or less similar in size and structure. And of course, we select universities which we have previously collaborate with. It is not fixed now, so it is a process which we did finish now, but I would like to mention that it is an intention also to increase the critical mass of excellence, which was mentioned before, and which is also important for Rostock as a rather small university. We don't want to collaborate in the Baltic Sea region only because we are located at the Baltic Sea, rather because we do many research regarding or which are related to the Baltic Sea. I have here only very few examples of research projects and education projects we have carried out during the last years. And you can see here the strong relation to the Baltic Sea region. To give some examples, it deals with pollution, for example, or management of coastal zones. We also had projects on wetlands. We had projects on education and labor market in the Baltic Sea region, and also regarding recycling and nutrient recycling in agriculture. The disciplines which the strongest relation to the Baltic Sea are civil engineering, natural sciences, and also environmental sciences and agriculture. And my last slide should show that we, of course, we don't act alone and separated in our region. We are very strongly linked to other research institutes which also help to get the critical mass of excellence and to be more successful in obtaining big projects in the future. This is all from my side. Thank you for your attention.
Yes. So, dear colleagues, now we have the time for discussion. Not that much that we initially suggested, but still we have the time. You have shown it from the different perspectives, the barriers, but the most comprehensive list was given, of course, by it emerged from the special study. And as much as I understood, there were different kinds of these barriers. Some of them barriers are intrinsic to the local national research and development on innovation systems, and the other barriers are concerning with our interaction with the EU basic structures. And what do we think? What should be done? Of course, it's again the same situation. What was in the first session? We come now and then to the conclusion that this problem is extremely multifaceted. There are so many different kinds, and there is no single silver bullet to solve all the problems. But what do you think? What are the most important things? Who have to take the responsibility first to make the first real step forward in the Baltic states? Because you also showed that there are huge differences in the performance, and it's perhaps because of the different development rates of the research and innovation systems. Who has to take the first really big step? And what this step should look like? Yeah, please.
Can I jump on this opportunity to answer this? I think I find very interesting and challenging, and I think very promising the idea what Žilvinas suggested. Why don't we do a pilot? a pilot project. And when we say we can select how big we are. Like we could do Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, for example. We could put some money onto the research funding program in which we evaluate the quality of the project, we evaluate the impact of the project, and we randomly assign available funds to those projects that score best on those. There would be your double-blind evaluation where we don't ask actually what the team is, right? It is a kind of a, probably, it sounds extreme because evaluation of the competence of the group for the ability to carry out of the project is important. But then if the group is able to pull together a project which is promising by the assessment of experts, and it is with a good potential of impact, then why not to give random assignment of the funding? And I think that wouldn't be too big of a experiment. That would be a good
It
sort
sounds
of
quite
potential.
revolutionary.
Yeah,
Yep.
but why not?
So could we have that pilot in the whole Baltic Sea region to enhance the cooperation in the whole Baltic Sea region? Because now I think the problem is that Baltic states are often doing together things like that, and then Nordic states are doing together. So this kind of easier than EU program possibility for the whole Baltic Sea region.
Yes.
Yeah, if I can just make two comments. I think there's work to be done on two levels, including initiatives like the one you proposed. I think it requires a whole system to be much more agile. The world is changing, we're identifying barriers, we have ideas, but it seems like including any idea takes a lot of time, a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, a lot of kind of settling, even though it's probable that we all agree that there is a barrier and there is a solution that has a chance to actually deal with it. Like I was talking to a colleague today about the problem of the unequal remuneration of the researchers. It's solved, but like it takes a lot of time to debate it, to discuss it, and to include it in the system. So I think the system needs to be much more agile and react much quicker. That's one thing. And another thing that I think was visible in your research too is that it's up to us, the national governments, to kind of switch the economies much more towards innovation and R&D. And this is a job that we've started that. The Polish government has done a lot of work to switch this our economy towards that, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Thank you.
Yes, I would briefly give the view from the university. I believe many obstacles were written already in the session material. These are the same which I believe that are the obstacles for the Rostock University as well. We are a relatively small player. We have problems the human resources. We haven't so many human resources to develop projects and to write proposals. So it would be very helpful to increase the human resources, which is of course not that easy in our region. But it would be also, I think, an important point is to create partnerships, because with similar partners, we are not all the universities are excellent, but if a university doesn't belong to the excellence cluster, doesn't mean that they don't do excellent research, but to find partners and that we get the critical mass that was mentioned before. I think this is important. Thank you.
So I think what we take from the study is that there are some, I would guess, relatively technical tweaks to the program that could help a lot, like double-blind evaluation, introduction of fixed rates, etc., that would have massive positive impact. On the other hand, the national governments also need to do a lot, because if we look at the EU 13 participation rates, most of them are not converging. And if not for one case, I would say, okay, so this is doomed story, nothing will change, try as much as you will, and the countries tried, and the framework programs changed, and nothing changed. But I'm happy we're today here in Estonia. Estonia is converging very fast. So also I think this points very strongly to the importance of also the national efforts to introduce a transparent, well-funded system with the right incentives for the researchers, with high capacities to participate in the project. And so I think that there are two sides of this, the changes at the framework program level, as well as changes in the national level. Without the both, you cannot see a breakthrough. But given the history, the 15 years or so, of relatively disappointing results for most of the countries, I think now it's the time to be brave and courageous and do the experiments, evaluate how do we perform, and then move on.
I think one solution in the Baltic Sea region could be to create an innovation platform for example, in certain thematic field, or several innovation platforms that could be financed by different countries, where that would enable also rapid experimentations and piloting and involvement of companies that could then cooperate with research sector. So that would ease the cooperation between these actors.
So thank you very much. I think that we have to give the possibility to the audience to put some questions to the speakers. Do you have questions? Yes, please. To the gentleman in the first row and afterwards to the back row. First here, please. Please wait.
I promise I won't keep asking questions all day, but I just want to make a statement to the last Finnish comment. You guys already have those innovation platforms. They're called KICs. Your member states are involved, and they're already aligned with 6 thematic agenda. So please talk to me afterwards. If you don't know enough about them, you really should. But now is the time to experiment and answer the questions, and that is, I'm not saying it's the answer and it'll do everything, but it's a really important lever that you guys need to be aware of and pulling in this debate, because many of the things you talk about are the self-same things that we are worrying about, and we need to bring the investment in our networks to solve your problems.
So thank you for this information. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Henrik Morgan from the Technical University of Denmark. Thank you very much for really interesting presentations. I got somewhat wiser why, from an academic perspective, it's difficult to engage with partners from the Baltic region for Horizon 2020 actions, for example, for KIC actions also. So my question would be, and some of you touched briefly upon it, but my question is, in your various member states or governments, are there any measures to help your institutions to be more active in conceptualizing project proposals? So for competitive bids, it was mentioned, and I think correctly, that not all countries in the Baltic region have the tradition really for competitive research and innovation funding, and others seem to have not the right incentives at the institutional level for their, for example, professors to invest the necessary time to develop with partners outside the region competitive and winning bid proposals. So I'm actually asking, is that a concern in any of your countries to raise incentives and support of your, for example, academic staff to be investing the necessary time together with other partners in the pre-projects before the proposal is actually submitted to, for
Let's start
example,
with
the
Germany.
European Union?
Yes, I can give only the answer from the Rostock University. Of course, there are other universities in Germany which are much stronger. We have incentives and we have some support system from the university level. And for instance, to give additional staff to researchers who write proposal, etc. But this is somehow limited. And then we try to join seed money projects, etc., which can also help to develop proposals for Horizon 2020 or Interreg, for instance. But I think it depends very much on financial and human resources.
Yes, we do, and we are intensifying those incentives. The first set of incentives we introduced in 2013, where we changed the way we are allocating institutional funding. In that formula, we put in criteria that gives you more money if you have international project money. Then, in the next step, we expanded that also into the higher education formula, where you, again, get more money for teaching if you have more projects and you involve your students in that. That's at the institutional level. Then we have introduced recently a number of programs where we aim at support to writing projects. That's through the national contact points, but then we also put out a set of the programs in which we will participate more intensively in the joint programming initiatives and other collaborative initiatives where we want our researchers to participate, and we also put out a program which aims at ability of at creation of capabilities. The probably challenge there is the willingness of the institution to take that opportunity, to take that program, and to actually do the thing at the institutional level. So it depends very much on the leadership in the university. But we're hopeful that it will work.
Yes, in Poland as well, first of all, all the structural funds are dispersed only on a competitive basis in this financial perspective. So we're kind of getting our researchers used to getting money only on a competitive basis. And also you cannot get project funding when you're on your own. You have to form a consortia or a network, find partners. So you have to cooperate and you have to compete in order to get the financing. And also, I'm not going to repeat, but pretty much like Latvia, we're changing our legal framework so that the state national financing is also much more based on the competitive basis, on the funding that you can get for projects.
Would you like to add something?
Yeah, so for Lithuania, there is also some support for proposal drafting, and also within the institutions, the STAR professors have some additional staff to help them and support. I think that overall this bottleneck, at least to some extent, have been alleviated, and the results should be there in the future. However, the next challenge is then building the critical mass. This year, during the prime time news, there was a news story that the Lithuanian researcher won the European Research Council grant. And you would wonder, so why is it on the national news? Well, because that's the first one, right? So this is good. The problem is we need 10 and 20 until it's so ordinary that it's not on the news anymore. So the STAR professors, I think, to a large extent have a lot of opportunities and also increasingly a lot of support to explore them. The problem is the number of the STAR professors, I would say.
So one of the recurrent conclusions from or the suggestions from the first session, and also which emerged here from your presentation, was that one of the barrier is the low investment in general in this part of the world into R&D, and you showed on the graphs what is the. It's quite evident that without the petrol, the car doesn't run long. So, do you think that this kind of discussions, what we have today, and what we have had this kind of discussions earlier during the Estonian presidency, the conference in Tallinn, we even coined the Tallinn call for action to invest more into research and development. Do you think that this kind of discussions will help your policymakers to come to that conclusion, or how can we achieve it? Because perhaps it's one of the barriers. So when you spoke about the different salaries, we can't expect that the EU grants will increase the salaries above the national average. We have to do ourselves something. Do you think that this kind of discussions, how to convey the message to the policymakers, to the ministries?
Yeah. Well, I would want to say that the message is not to be conveyed to the ministries. I think we are here. We are discussing it. I think it's a couple steps up, and the way we've been thinking about it, if we all know that the world now, everybody of us lives in our own information bubble, why don't we create a serious information bubble around our politicians and around our parliaments? I think we have to be in the face of the parliament, we have to be in the face of the politicians, and we have to target them directly. And I think targeting me is too low level, or you or your colleagues. It's too low level. We have to go level up. That is one. And I think we also have to work with population. We have to work with outreach. We have to stop sitting on our ivory towers and thinking that anybody cares. We have to really get out and speak to public. And it seems to me that the wave is on its upwards direction, and it is picking the momentum.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
So,
Can I just have a very short
then
comment?
we'll take more questions. Yeah, please.
Okay, my short comment would be, it would be very useful to have this kind of discussions, but on the other hand, I mean, the world is about perceptions. So if we focus so much on the barriers and say how difficult it is to apply, I think we might discourage actually a couple of people from applying. So I think it's good if we end up with some success stories showing people who actually overcame these barriers.
Thank you so much. There was a question or comment from Mr. Bircher.
Thank you very much for excellent presentations. I just would like to make a word of caution when it comes to the blind evaluation. Firstly, this presumes that experts have a bias against research institutions from the new member states. We have no evidence for this. There are experts from new member states who are also evaluators. We have reviewers, we have observers, and our evaluation system is considered as one of the most reliable. Secondly, we have had in the past blind evaluation. In Framework Program 5, we have abolished it because it was not manageable. We thought we will resolve an issue, and we have created many, many other issues. One reason or one criteria for assessing our proposals is the capacity to implement it, which is crucial if you want to deliver impact and innovation. How can you hide who you are? There are many indirect things which are known in a proposal. We have 140,000 proposals. Imagine to clean all these proposals that they are not recognizable. It is not possible. think is true in practical terms.
Thank you for this intervention. I think actually we have exhausted the time which was allocated to the session, but if there is one very important question from the audience, yes, please.
It's not a question, it's a comment. Christoph Wittmann from Lund University in Sweden. I think one term that has not been mentioned here is uniqueness. If you want to be successful in a competitive program, you have to provide something that is unique, that nobody else in the EU can provide. That can be a particular individual who stands out in the field. That can be a geographical location, like Rostock is uniquely situated along the coastline in Germany and has access to certain things that Munich cannot provide. So I would encourage everybody to think how you can make parts of your research system unique, then you will be attractive partners. Of course, that comes at a certain expense. Not everybody can be unique. Only a few people or institutions can be unique. But this is, I think, the only way to achieve excellence and to become an attractive partner in the European research arena.
So, thank you so much. I think that, do you have some general comment on our discussion, some conclusive remarks? What did you learn from this session?
A short round?
Yeah.
So clearly, this is a double-edged problem. I still think that tweaking the framework program rules could be important, and definitely there is a lot of thinking that needs to be done around how to do it better, to make it technically possible, but also to deliver the results. In Lithuanian language, we have the saying that more money than brains. So I think the national governments also need to invest wisely. So it's important to raise the level of investment, but also to make sure that the investments reach the end goals. Also, I think we focus so much on the programs, and it could be maybe a welcome move from process orientation towards outcomes and results orientation, and the national governments could also focus more on the results that should be achieved by allocation of funding.
Agreed.
Yeah, I guess for me the learning was that we are on a same track, and we are doing a lot of things, and the synergy here is obvious. And I would still urge and call that we try to experiment something. Let's put together some, I don't know, million each, and try to innovate in the way we allocate that money.
Thank you. Yeah, for me, the lesson learned is that despite the barriers that seem to be perversive all the time, I mean, it's long that we've had these barriers, and we weren't really able to overcome them. It seems like we have quite a lot of good ideas that we should simply experiment on. Maybe start not so much debating, but more trying.
I think what I started to think about was decision makers that have a crucial role, the national decision makers. So, because one problem is that the national policies are so different, and there is two heterogeneous approaches. So maybe some good method for where decision makers from each country could learn better from each other, so that there would not be so many communication problems between the decision makers.
Yes, I also learned from this session, of course. I learned that different institutions can be faced with very similar problems. Often it depends on resources, but I also believe that we should have a positive outlook, and I thank you very much for the comment regards the unique situation of Rostock, and I believe that each institution has a special structure or issue which can be very attractive even if the institution is small. Thank you.
So thank you all for this session, and thank the audience for your questions and input.